Yes. So could you speak about the land struggle happening in Simla?
Actually, the land struggle is not just happening in Simla but in different parts of the state, especially in areas where predominantly apple is grown. Apple, which happens to be one of the chief crop of the peasantry in the countryside. And it's actually to protect their land, it's to protect their trees, and it's uh, it's a very interesting struggle in the sense that uh, it's an order of the court, the High Court, which has given a very interesting order that the land that what they term as encroached land will be evicted. And the funny part of the order is that eviction could have happened in varied forms. But what the order states is that the trees would be chopped down. Initially, it was that the trees would be chopped down, and then further it has been amended that it will be pruned, and slowly the tree should die down. Now this is for more than 2 lakh farm holds. We have more than 9 lakh households that are still practicing farming, and Himachal happens to be the most rural state in the country. And you see, if you try to understand now, first of all, I think it is important for all of us to define and understand what encroachment actually means. And it is not to be understood in the pure ecological or environmental sense, but it has to be understood in more of a livelihood sense here in Himachal Pradesh. Now, if I go back to the history and to try to understand how this has happened, I would say it's not the people who are at fault and the peasants who are at fault, but it's the lackadaisical attitude of the governments, and by one single geo, that's the government order, terming all fallow land, all wasteland into forest land. And with the passage of time, the imbibed consciousness that the state and the people residing in the state had, that whatever land they would till would belong to them. And by the way, it is also important to mention here that Himachal happens to be one of those states where widespread land reforms has also taken place. So everyone owns a land. And then we have a predominant Dalit population. In fact, after Punjab, we have the second largest Dalit, the scheduled caste ratio in the country. And unlike in other parts of the country, here every Dalit household owned land. And how did this happen? Let me just try to explain that. You see, when the state was being carved out after 1950s, and finally we got statehood in 1971, but the Himachal state was carved out quite early, and then we had the new Himachal and the old Himachal. There was this consciousness that was imbibed from the government, because this was a predominantly poor state, and which couldn't grow cereals because of massive forest land that we have, and then because of the mountains. I mean, it's difficult, you see, to cultivate on the ridges. So we just have 16% of the land that can be tillable, I mean, which you can really plow. And so how do you sustain such a system? So with the wisdom of those times, the government and the then chief minister gave a slogan, grow more. And grow more meant that if you have to sustain, and if you have to, and of course it was complemented by the state apparatus, like which eventually led to one of the highest human development index of Himachal Pradesh, probably after Kerala and all. So how did it happen? It happened because of two reasons. One, because land was an important area, land reforms took place, land was distributed, and then some land before 1980, before the nationalization of the forest, when we had the Forest Conservation Act, land was distributed amongst the Dalits also. So it was called Nautod, New Tod. You break a land and then you distribute it to the peasantry. And large chunk of the gainers were the Dalits. So they really got land. And it was 1 acre. 1 acre land was given to each and every household. That happened till 1980. How could that happen? Because there was a wisdom then, and then government gave a slogan, grow more. Like whichever land you till, and with the subsequent settlements that were supposed to happen, the land would eventually get into your name and you'll get a pata out of that. This continued till 1980. But after 1980s, when we had the Forest Conservation Act, this couldn't happen. But the consciousness went on because the government gave this slogan. And you see, there are very funny incidents, if I could share those anecdotes with you. in 1950s, and if you go by the folklores, I mean the people that sing folklores, three are the enemies at the countryside. One happens to be a patwari, the lowermost revenue officer, the police wala, and the forest guard. I mean they are considered to be the enemies of the peasantry. Now police wala and police wala means the cop, the policeman, and the guard you can understand because they are important. But why a patwari, a revenue officer? Because in 1950s, if the revenue officer had some grudge or prejudice against a peasant, the revenue officer would name that land into someone's name, because the lagan was so much. I mean, the revenue that was to be collected was so high that the peasantry would beg in front of the revenue officer that, for heaven's sake, don't put this land on my name. So that also knows kind of thing. That's very interesting, small, and they're folklores. I mean, singing, folk people singing those songs because they couldn't pay the revenues. They said, this is not our land, please take it back. But you see, that shows the wisdom of the then leadership. Of course, it was the Congress party at that time, and which always played a center of lift kind of paradigm of politics here in Himachal, and which eventually led to a situation where people tilled land. They went into for apple production, for off-season vegetables, of course, cereals and all that stuff. And eventually, if you see the trajectory of growth of Human Development Index is extremely good. In comparison, of course, not very good, but in comparison to other states. Land was the major question. But after 1980s, land couldn't be distributed. But people had this consciousness, whatever land is adjoining, because it's still not defined what is forest land, what is not. So we in Himachal, there's another very funny thing that has happened is that by 1956 GO, what I was trying to explain, and then also by successive legislations, all fallow land, all land that is not in anyone else's name, even common land, community land of the village, happens to be forest land. Now what do you do with such a situation? Where people adjoining to there, because after 1980s the households divided. I mean, so if you had 1 acre, it further got divided. So you cannot sustain such an agriculture. So they moved to some part of the land which they tilled, which eventually led that this is encroachment. This is forest land. But the funniest part that I would say happened is in 2002 when we had the BJP government. And then Revenue Minister and the government passed a resolution unanimously in the Assembly and the Legislature, and said that all those who till such land, I mean they plow such land, we are there to transfer this land into their names. We'll give them a patta, and they must give us an affidavit that this is. So before that, 2002, the government hardly knew which land is encroached. People were tilling that land. But after 2002, government had a proof. And when they said we were about to distribute, they couldn't have done so for the simple reason, because it was forest land. The state government cannot distribute Government of India's land. I mean, forest land happens to be Government of India land. And it was a kind of nightmare for the peasantry. Now the government has the proof, because people in the affidavits have given this is forest land which we have encroached upon. Now, this is the struggle that is going on. And then we have proactive high courts without understanding what encroachment is, without understanding the class basis of encroachment, because there is an encroachment of even 1 biga. 1 biga means 12 bigas constitute 1 hectare here when we understand. So such small encroachments, I mean, people, for them it's a livelihood question. And then we also have 6 hectares, 7 hectares encroachment as well. But then not a single person with such a large encroachment has been touched. In fact, it's the poor and the Dalits, I would say the marginal, who have been asked, who've been tried because they had their affidavits given. The DFO under the PP Act tried their case, and then they said, yes, we are prepared to leave our land. And it is at that place where this movement is going on. And the Kisan Sabha happens to be, and the Apple Growers Association, we have 2 organizations who are in the forefront leading the struggle, where in some of the places, the women even went ahead to launch a Chipko movement. They said, you cannot chop down our trees. At the most, if there is encroachment, you seal that. You fence that, and you can fence and then you can do whatever. But to chop down an apple tree is something, it is against ecology, it is against environment, it is against nature. And we have had good demonstrations. And even the Vidhan Sabha was forced when we had the legislature last time, and even this budget session in the state assembly, we were forced. They were forced to pass a law that they will move to the court and even to the Supreme Court to ensure that no more trees are being cut. But despite that, trees are being cut, peasants are being scared away, and the movement and the struggle is going on, and lots and lots of people are coming up, because it's very widespread, I must say. Every third or fourth household owns some land which they term as encroachment, as forest land. Whereas forest was, and if I go back again to history once again, the forest rights were registered during the British Raj, in fact, when we had the British rule, and what we call the Wazir-ul-Arj, this is a Persian word. Wazir-ul-Arj meant that the rights of the forest dwellers, the community that lives apart from the tribals, with the forest, for fuel, for fodder, their rights would be reserved. And those registered reserve rights have also been given a go by. I mean, it's not really been taken care of. So, and if people lose their livelihood, people lose their land, people lose their orchards, and in fact, the squeeze that is happening, and apart from the overall crisis that is happening in the farmland and the peasantry, and the entire agrarian crisis, I would say, it is further squeezing, and the most marginalized sections happens to be the Dalits. In fact, they are the most affected, and I think that's what I want.
So that what is the state of affairs with this movement, sir, right now? Do they have any protest coming up?
Yeah, protests. Every day there are protests going on. In fact, today also, I think there are 3 or 4 places where protests are going on. And you see, it's physical. I mean physical in the sense that the forest guard people are moving ahead to chop down the trees, and people are coming and resisting them. And they're not allowing them. So some places the people succeed, at certain places the forest guards and the government machinery succeed.
So that lathi charge happening?
Yeah, even lathi charge takes place. Lathi charge, arrests are taking place. People are being arrested. People, the FIRs are being registered, because now the court has said. But people are defying court orders as well. I mean, after all, it's their land, it's their place. And
how was the media coverage, sir, about this issue?
I think the media, tragically, what is happening is media is too regional here. So you'll find that news. For example, if you understand the geography of this place, Shimla district, then we have adjoining Kullu, Mandi, so, and then in Shimla we have Rodu and Rampur areas. So the paper that covers Rampur, you will not get the same news in Shimla. It's in the same district. So yes, there you can find some media coverage, but I mean it's not the mainstream state kind of thing that is happening. It's not still.
And English and all?
Very little.
Very little. Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.